Good afternoon, everyone. We are certainly pleased to be in the People's House today and reconnect and invite you. This is the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, which means so much to the entire nation. I'd like to say that democracy gave birth to the rule of law, and the rule of law gave birth to Brown versus the Board of Education. It's what made it possible. But the message I always want to send is that this Supreme Court decision, pivoting on the 14th Amendment, is something that impacted every single citizen of this country, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, because it affirmed our sovereign right as citizens not to have those rights arbitrarily restricted by state and local governments. But that was an arbitrary restriction. So we're pleased to be here. We know we have a lot of work to do in that education is still challenging in some places, but we have to realize that education is foundational to our country. And the more we can make certain our children are accomplishing and contributing, the better things will be. So thank you so much for coming to cover this activity. And I'm so pleased that 25 litigants from the Brown cases, and Belton, Hewlett v. Gephardt, and Briggs v. Elliott, and Davis v. Prince Edward County, and Brown v. Board of Education are here to be recognized by this administration.
Could you tell us your name before you step away?
Sure. Question?
Tell us your name, ma'am.
Oh, my name?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Cheryl Brown Henderson. I'm so sorry. Obviously, I'm nervous. So I'm the youngest daughter of Oliver Brown, for whom the case is named. The case is Oliver L. Brown et al. Versus the Board of Education. So knowing who the et als are is my mission. So today, there is no et al. Today is just Briggs and Davis and Hewlett and Belton and all of the people that made this happen.
And you said there's still work to do. Is that something you discussed with the president?
What I mean by that is that we're still fighting the battle over whose children do we invest in. Anytime we can talk about failing underfunded public schools, there is a problem. There should be no such thing. Public institutions where most of us got our education should be world-class educational institutions. So I'm not understanding that, and I want us to roll up our sleeves and get back to the hard work of educating our children.
What was the president's message to you today?
Pardon?
What was the president's message? President's message?
Oh, the president's message. Oh, my goodness. Well, obviously, he talked about being pleased to meet everyone and thanking everyone for their sacrifice. He recognized that back in the 50s and the 40s, when Jim Crow was still running rampant, that the folks that you see here were taking a risk when they signed on to be part of this case. Anytime you push back on Jim Crow and segregation, your life, your livelihood, your home, you were taking a risk. He thanked them for taking that risk.
Sure. What was it like to be back at the White House after so long? Last time you were here was about 10 years ago. And also, did you ask the president to do anything specifically? I asked what it was like to be back at the White House after so long. The last time you were here was about 10 years ago. And also, did you ask the president to do anything specifically today?
Yeah, we talked about one of the litigants, I must say. First of all, being back at the White House is always a privilege and an honor. And it's the people's house, and it feels good to be what I consider one of the symbols of our democracy, the White House. One of the litigants did ask for something. He talked about having Brown v. Board of Education should be a national holiday, which would enable the country to learn more about it and to commemorate it every year as such. So that was kind of the big ask today. Other than supporting HBCUs and doing everything he's currently doing, we're pleased that this administration is so diverse and looks like this country. We've waited a long time for that.
You said that this legislation is something for everyone. Can you elaborate on that? We understand as African Americans that it allowed our society to be rebuilt. Can you just give us some commentary on what it means for us all?
You're asking what Brown means for us all? Is that
Yes.
what you're asking? Well, if you consider what Earl Warren read that day, the first part of the opinion that we don't talk about very often, he affirmed the significance of education. He basically said that education is the most important function of state and local government. and went on to say that no child can be expected to succeed in life without the benefit of an education. And he used the word right. He said it is a right that must be provided in an equal measure. That's what he read before what everybody seems to remember, that in the field of public education and so on. So I really wish he had started with that, because it affirms the significance of education as being foundational to our democracy.
What do you make of the president's erosion of supporters among black voters? What do you make of the erosion of support among black voters for the president?
Oh, the erosion of support. We have others here to speak, so I'm going to step away from the podium. Thank you so much.
Please introduce yourselves first.
Derek Johnson, President and CEO of the NAACP. 70 years ago, the NAACP, we filed the case that was successful in 1954. But as a result of that case, southern states resisted full implementation. The next year, the Supreme Court had to hear how to implement the Brown decision. And as a result, we have yet to fulfill the promise of Brown. Separate but equal was deemed unconstitutional. Just recently, we had to file a lawsuit against the state of Arkansas because the history by which we're standing here today is being denied to be taught as advanced placement classes in the state of Arkansas. There's much more work to do. And not only are we recognizing and celebrating the Brown family litigants, and it was not only one case from Kansas, it was in Delaware, it was here in D.C., it was in South Carolina. We also are recognizing retired Supreme Court State Judge Fred Banks. Because for 60 years after the Brown decision, he continued to litigate full implementation of the Brown decision in Mississippi. We have yet to fully comply with Brown. No other nation, developed nation, seeks to outsource their future in education, unlike America. And America is doing that simply because they have refused to comply with Brown. So we stand here today appreciating this administration for acknowledging the fight that we're in, but recognizing that our future is dependent on a well-trained workforce, and that can only happen with public education. And so we are proud for this administration to acknowledge that, but we also acknowledge the fight continues.
When you talk about the fight continuing, we saw in the 90s there was like a reverse, and we saw segregation increasing in schools. So what is the plan of attack? The Board of Education from last year said that you're seeing a huge resurgence and schools are still segregated. How are you going to, what are you going to do in that field? And also when it came to teachers, nearly 40,000 were let go after the board decision. How are you fighting that from black teachers and representation in the classroom?
Well, the fight continues. Just recently we filed a lawsuit in Arkansas because they refuse to teach black history. We have multiple states across the country who are refusing to teach adequate history. But this decision is not only a legal decision, it's a political decision. Whoever is elected next year will determine at least 2 members of the Supreme Court. We must have a federal judiciary who is willing to enforce the ruling of Brown to ensure that all children are treated equally when it comes to quality education. So that fight continues. It is a political fight. It is a legal fight. It is a moral fight to ensure that we have a future that's reflective of the demographics of this country today and not the demographics of 1950.
What did you say to the president when you were in that room? What was your ask?
My ask was him to continue to fight. That we must, not only as a nation, but also as communities across the country, to understand the importance of public education for all children. All children should be provided a quality education. We cannot outsource it. We must double down on it in order for us to compete globally in this economy.
Why is the president seeing an erosion of black support?
Moms for Liberty and similar organizations to pro-segregationist parents that flourished in the wake of the 1954 Supreme Court decision. What is NAACP doing to combat those organizations? And do you agree with that characterization?
Well, I absolutely agree with SPLC's assessment of those groups. Progress isn't in a straight line. It's a pendulum that's swinging back and forth. We must continue to fight on all fronts, whether it's narrative, in the courts, or politically, to ensure every child is provided quality education. And as we make progress, there will be fights and pushback to impede progress. And we recognize that. That's why as an organization, we're 115 years old, we will continue to fight, and every chance we get, we're going to try to prevent groups like those mentioned from trying to impede quality education for all children and the teaching of accurate history to our young people.
How does the president reverse this erosion of black support?
Well, I don't accept the premise that there's any word erosion of black
You don't
support.
believe in polls?
I believe that polls have proven itself to be untrue for the last 4 election cycles.
Yeah.
What I do believe is we are in a crisis of our democracy. We must decide whether or not we're going to have a functioning democracy that's representative of all of the citizens or something less than that. I hope that the American public recognize the importance of our democracy. In order for us to remain a leading democracy, we must participate at the highest level. This election is not about candidate A versus candidate B. It's about whether or not we have a functioning democracy or something less than that.
Did you guys talk about?
Sorry, I have a quick question for the plaintiffs. Did you guys also have a chance to meet with Vice President Harris while you were here today? And do you expect to meet with her while you're in town?
My name is Nathaniel Briggs. I'm from the Rich versus Elliott case out of South Carolina. We did not meet President Harris, Vice President Harris. I think she's on another assignment, but we met with the President in that respect. But let me tell you about 70 years of education in this country. It really does mean something. That means an explosion went off in this country in May 17, 1954, and all of us, either good or bad, have felt this explosion. In some cases in our inner cities, some of the schools was integrated through busing. My particular hometown in the country, well, this never happened. So the Supreme Court made a decision that we're going to, economic reasons, we're going to call it integration. And a year later, I think the Supreme Court said, how are we going to implement this thing called Brown? So in 1955, we got all delivered speed that allowed communities like mine in South Carolina 10 years later to integrate the school system. In Virginia, it's different. They closed the school for 5 years. So this thing about that the president said about education is not finished. It's a long struggle in this country. You can't put the weight on the shoulders of the folks who are here. The weight is on you guys to tell the truth. That's where the weight lies. If you write the truth, what the president of the said, but the weight, we can only tell the story and you hope that the press get it right. And that has not always been the case. So I'm here saying that South Carolina, there was a struggle in South Carolina. It wasn't an easy case, so it's nice to celebrate, commemorate, but I know the struggle still continues in some of the school districts around this country. I know that the unequal access to education still exists in this country. That's my story. Let me end with this. As we celebrate 70 years, commemorate in South Carolina, when the repression came with the NAACP that came to our rescue in South Carolina. That lone organization that came to Thurgood Marshall, our attorney. But we was drowning in this despair of Jim Crowism in South Carolina. I know this case from the inside out, but I say to you, with the NAACP that stood the ground, opened the doors, and kept the doors open, and kept us safe in our stress for equal access to education. Our struggle is not integration, equal access to education. I think the Supreme Court give it a name, call it whatever you want to call it. That's where it's at now.
I have a really quick question. I have just to level the playing field, and you've challenged us today. You say that the media isn't doing a good job of keeping history. So I would like, before you go, to answer this question. The assertion is that education is the great equalizer of all races and classes in America. That's been promoted since Brown v. Board.
Yes.
What is the truth?
The truth? Well, America, I live in New Jersey. All the schools in New Jersey are probably more segregated now than it ever has been. And that's a microcosm of what America looks like. So you ask me to put the onus on me, I put the onus on the press. Can you tell the truth about if the schools are terrible in your neighborhood, tell the truth. Sometimes the press just don't tell that truth. I'm a witness to what the press has done, what to do good, but the truth is about education, true education in America. Is the kids from the Indian reservation getting equal access to education, or West Virginia, or my little hometown, Clarendon County, South Carolina? I said no. And prove to me I'm wrong, press. But that's what we're up against. True education in America for everybody. But we'll spend billions of dollars to buy an airplane or bomb, but not on education.
Thank you. Last question.
So you back off on that.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Last question.
you mentioned the Supreme Court and equal education. So did you guys, in your talk with the president, did you mention the recent affirmative action that the Supreme Court took? Majority of Black and brown students in college are carrying a lot of student loan burden. So is that something that you also perhaps discussed with the president?
So let's be clear. What happened today was an appreciation for the sacrifices of the families who were the original litigants. That's what the purpose was for. And understanding that for the individuals who had enough courage to file these lawsuits, they had to live in a hostile environment. And so this moment was to say thank you to those families for making America live up to its promise and holding the Constitution true to its commitment. That's what the goal was today. And so for that, I would personally say thank you to all of the families of the litigants, because in 1954 and before, to file a lawsuit in South Carolina, in Kansas, in Delaware, in DC, could cause harm, economic harm, physical harm to those families. And for that, we should commend them, and that's why we're here today. Thank you all for this opportunity.
Thank you.
I've heard a lot of things. It's because of the fact that you were young and you went in that dispensation. Certain homes were burned during that time because we were fighting for the right, for equality and justice. So something bothers me that there's a conspiracy of silence throughout the world to hide our history. And I heard someone ask the question, why was it important? It was important to me because the administration has not forgotten for which we've come. We've come a long way. We still have a long way to go. Schools were closed in Virginia County from 1959 to 1964. Most of you don't know about that. How many of you know about that? You don't know about it. So you see, there are certain things you are asking because of your ages. But when they see someone like us, our ages, they sort of back off. Because we live through. I saw crosses burn. In fact, there's one that's in my book. Okay, you want to know the history of what we went through. I'm going to refer you to about 3 or 4 publications. One is Prince Edward County, the history of Prince Edward County, by Herman. The next one is a publication by Bob Smith. They closed that book, that closed that school. Another one is an individual who wrote Civil Justice. Refer to that information. Are you aware that after the Supreme Court decision was rendered, they tried to stop it in Congress? They tried to stop it through 2 individuals. One used to be the governor of the state of Virginia. They also tried to stop it in the State House in Richmond, Virginia. All you have to do is refer to the Court by Commission. But through it all, we survived. That is the reason it took time to get. Because we come along. Thank you very much.
What's your name, sir? John.
John
You can refer to my website, The Man, the Mission, the Story. And you'll find out a lot more that we have stated that. And we're grateful to Mr. Oliver Hill, Mr. Marshall, and all other individuals who took out the case. This didn't start overnight. It started in 1950. And here we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.